My father is, to his core, a man of commitment. I don't just mean that in a general sense. He is unflinchingly dedicated to what matters, focused and principled, funny and kind. Canadians care about actions, and my father is a man of action, a man who has traveled the length of Canada to hear what Canadians want from their leaders, what they want for their future. He's up early to read his papers and stays up late preparing for the next day. He has taught me the importance of always putting in the work. But you can work hard all you want. If you don't have a solid foundation, there's nothing to build on. And that's what I really want to share with you tonight.
Okay.
Alors, bonsoir tout le monde. Wow, this room is strong. This room is Canada strong. Thank you, Cleo. And to my wife, Diana, our children, Cleo, Tess, Amelia, and Sasha. Without your support, I wouldn't be standing here. And like the Prime Minister, without your examples, I wouldn't have a purpose. Without your love, I wouldn't have the strength that I need for what lies ahead. Thank you. Monsieur, vous encore les comme personne ne peut. Canada se tiendra toujours debout pour ce qui est juste. Et vous êtes une source d'inspiration pour tous les Canadiens.
He's like, oh my God, his French is terrible.
And may I say that you inspired my family to become liberals, including my father to run as a liberal candidate in Alberta in the 1980s. Some elections are tougher than others, and you inspired me over the years. And now to have an opportunity to continue your tradition of fiscal responsibility, social justice, and international leadership.
It's so funny celebrating individual political figures or like his father. No acknowledgement of the people, of community-based organizing. Just looking up to literally just like power. Like just wanting power. Real change, from what I know, usually originates from labor movements, social justice groups, grassroots movements, and other bottom-up efforts, not someone enamored by power. Very much a missed opportunity by Mr. Carney here to credit the forces that also shape these electoral outcomes, the forces that actually bring about progress.
Prime Minister Trudeau, my time doesn't permit me to recognize all your accomplishments, so I'll speak at a higher level. You have combined strength and compassion every day as a fighter for Canada. You have led us through some of the hardest challenges that this nation has ever faced. Et en même temps, vous avez...
Like, again, I said this with the other speech with Chrétien, like appealing to one's compassion, but doesn't really address the underlying unresolved issues of systemic inequality, environmental injustice, reconciliation with Indigenous peoples. Compassion requires something stronger than just virtues and words, right? It takes commitment, and commitments such as fully funding Indigenous services, clean water for Indigenous peoples, robust climate action, and maybe addressing wealth inequality through progressive taxation and things like that. Not just platitudes and virtue signaling. Yeah.
Transformer le Canada. Bien transformer notre pays. En sortant de centaines de milliers d'enfants de la pauvreté. En faisant vraiment avancer la réconciliation et en défendant la liberté et la démocratie toujours ici et ailleurs dans le monde. C'est vrai. Monsieur le Premier ministre, je parle pour tout le monde en vous remerciant pour votre travail acharné, comme Ella Grace l'a mentionné, votre travail acharné, votre leadership et pour votre service à notre grand pays. Je tiens à vous remercier, chers libéraux, de m'avoir accordé le plus grand honneur qui soit, celui de servir comme votre nouveau chef. Merci. Et merci aux dizaines de milliers de bénévoles à travers le pays pour votre dévouement à rebâtir notre parti Canada. I pledge to you and to all Canadians that I will follow their example. I will work day and night with one purpose, which is to build a stronger Canada for everyone. But I will need help. I will need a lot of help. And so I'd like to thank Christia, Frank, and Karina for your energy and ideas and leadership that you have brought. I would like also to thank those ministers who remained in their posts to serve Canada directly during this time of great peril. And to the incredible group of Liberal MPs that we have. You are the voices for your communities, and you are the conscience of our party. Thank you. Now, to give a sense of that service, I'm going to quote from a message that I and Christia, Karina, and Frank, the four of us, received from someone called Bob Zettel. Now, full disclosure, I know the leader of the opposition's into full disclosure, so I'm going to... Full disclosure. Full disclosure! Just want to get this on the table. Bob goes to my church. Actually, I go to Bob's church because he goes there a lot more frequently than I do. Anyways, point is, Bob wrote to the 4 candidates, and he said, I quote, "Right now, everyone sees the main threat as the Trump tariffs. But the far greater challenge will be, as it always has been, to foster unity and a sense of the common good. There are those who will seek power by dividing us." We'll get to that later on. And we being the people of Canada, we need you, my fellow candidates, myself, to continue in positions of leadership to promote a united Canada, a commitment to common good and the respect and the rule of law throughout the world. See, I quote Bob because right now all Canadians are being asked to serve in their own ways. We're all being called to stand up for each other and for the Canadian way of life. So let me ask you, who's ready? Stand up for Canada with me. 100%. Yes. Yes. Yes, Canada. Yes, Canada. The Liberal Party is united and strong and ready to fight to build an even better country. Now, I feel like everything in my life has helped prepare me for this moment. 2 months ago, I put up my hand to run for leader because I felt we needed big changes guided by strong Canadian values. The values I learned at the dinner table from my parents, Bob and Verley, and my 3 siblings, Brenda, Sean, and Brian. Values that I learned at the hockey rinks of Edmonton from my coaches, such as Stormin Norman Lee. We didn't call him that to his face, by the way, but that was his... My parents were teachers, and they stressed the importance of hard work, of community, and of tolerance. My coaches were dedicated volunteers who taught me the importance of teamwork, ambition, and because it's Canada, humility.
It's just all platitudes, right? Like highlighting quote-unquote Canadian values, tolerance, humility. It really often does not delve into who is excluded from those things. These ideals don't really address how racialized peoples, Indigenous peoples, low-income peoples, many different type of Canadians face tons of systemic barriers, tolerance and humility. Values are good, but you got to follow up with tangible policy, actual material anti-racism initiatives, investment in marginalized communities, and obviously like a return to robust public service. All of those things would better reflect quote-unquote values and the stated principles of tolerance and humility and community, because I'm not hearing any of that.
Je les ai emportés avec moi à l'université. Je les ai gardés près de moi en gérant des crises ici au Canada et ailleurs dans le monde. Ces mêmes valeurs m'ont guidé dans mon travail pour bâtir des économies fortes. Et aujourd'hui, je m'y accroche alors que nous faisons face de notre génération. Canadians know that new threats demand new ideas and a new plan. They know that new challenges demand new leadership. Canadians want positive leadership that will end division and help us build together. And to respond, my government will put into action our plan to build a stronger economy, new trading relationships with reliable trading partners, and to secure our borders. Ça demandera des changements, de grands changements. Mais je sais que les Canadiens et Canadiennes sont prêts. Ils me le disent à travers le pays. Les gens veulent le changement parce qu'ils sont inquiets
because they're concerned. They're
de le
concerned
coût de la vie
about the cost of
et de
living
la crise de
and
logement.
the housing crisis as well.
L'avenir des
For
jeunes.
the future of their young.
Ils
their
s'inquiètent de
kids.
l'avenir du Canada face aux menaces du président Trump et à un monde plus et dangereux.
Divided and dangerous world.
Now, I am a pragmatist. So when I see that something's not working, I will change it. So my government will immediately eliminate the divisive consumer carbon tax on families, farmers, and small and medium-sized businesses.
That's such a dunk on Trudeau. It's so funny, like framing eliminating the divisive consumer carbon tax as pragmatic. Any principled environmentalist sees that financialization of the climate crisis, that form of carbon pricing, just another way for corporations to have tax evasions and things like that. It at one point was a useful tool, but there's modern economic theory. There's tons of different ways to approach it now. Obviously, there's things that need to be equitably structured that I'm sure people like Mark Carney understand, but definitely are not going to be able to implement. I would love to be surprised, but the carbon tax and the carbon emissions and the financialization of carbon emissions as a whole is just false. Carney was one of the people who helped make that concept popular in a business sense, but without presenting any type of stronger and actual quote unquote pragmatic climate strategy, stripping away overt things like that would really undermine even just the popular support for a party that is doing something about climate crisis, because there's urgent needs for emission reduction and fairness for communities who are most vulnerable to climate impacts, whether it be financially or materially actually being affected by the weather and by climate change and the instability of climate. I know that he's like a green thumb, but in probably the worst way possible, where he just wants to financialize the crisis. But I hope that he's got a plan, because just saying I'm immediately going to strip away carbon tax on day one, I don't think the carbon tax is useful in any way, but it's just a very, I don't know, it seems, I hope he has a formidable strategy to do something in response. And that's not an endorsement of the carbon tax in any way, but I hope there's some type of overt climate policy, because he's gonna need it, we're gonna need it. Yeah.
And we will stop the hike in the capital gains tax, because we think builders should be incentivized for taking risks and rewarded when they succeed.
What a pragmatist.
Canada needs more of this type of change. Change that puts more money in people's pockets. Change that makes our companies more competitive. Change that builds the strongest economy in the G7. Now, there's someone who's trying to do the opposite. There's someone who's trying to weaken our economy. Yeah, Donald Trump. And Donald Trump, as we know, has put, as the Prime Minister just said, unjustified tariffs on what we build, on what we sell, on how we make a living. He's attacking Canadian families, workers, and businesses, and we cannot let him succeed. And we won't. I am proud of the response of Canadians who are making their voices heard and their wallets felt. I am grateful for how our provinces are stepping up to the fight, because when we are united, we are Canada strong. The Canadian government has rightly retaliated and is rightly retaliating with our own tariffs that will have maximum impact in the United States and minimum impact here in Canada. And my government will keep our tariffs on until the Americans show us respect, and until they can join us in making credible and reliable commitments to free and fair trade, as Krista did. Yeah. And in the meantime, we will ensure that all the proceeds from our tariffs will be used to protect our workers. Les Américains veulent
Our water,
notre territoire,
our land,
notre pays.
our country even.
Pensez-y.
Never. Think about that.
On détruire
That will
notre
destroy
façon d'être.
our way of life.
The Americans want our resources, our water, our land, our country. Think about it. If they succeeded, they would destroy our way of life. In America, healthcare is a big business. In Canada, it is a right.
Again, I would relax on that because our healthcare across the board is becoming increasingly privatized, increasingly financialized. Again, not another thing to be having a touchdown dance over.
America is a melting pot. Canada is a mosaic. Aux États-Unis, on ne reconnaît pas les différences. On ne reconnaît pas les Premières Nations. Et il n'y aura jamais de droit à la langue française. La joie de vivre, la culture et la langue française font partie de notre identité.
There's some states where Indigenous peoples have more rights than in Canada. And the reason they have that is because they had guns from the beginning. Obviously, it isn't across the board, but there's some places in the U.S. where the tribes have far more rights than Indigenous peoples in Canada, some Indigenous peoples in Canada, and their First Nations could ever imagine. And again, it's because they had guns. Whereas in Canada, we removed their access to guns very early on. So, yeah, huge contradiction there, Mark.
Il faut les protéger. On ne les échangera jamais pour n'importe quel accord commercial. No. America is not Canada. And Canada never, ever will be part of America in any way, shape, or form. We didn't ask for this fight, but Canadians are always ready when someone else drops the glove. So the Americans, they should make no mistake, in trade as in hockey, Canada will win. Aux Américains, je vous dis, comme au hockey, nous allons gagner. Mais cette victoire ne sera pas. Nous faisons face à la crise la plus importante de notre vie. Nous devrons faire des choses extraordinaires ensemble. Nous devrons construire des choses que nous n'avions jamais imaginées, que nous n'aurions jamais cru possible. Now, Donald Trump is trying to weaken our economy, but there's someone else who, if he succeeds, will weaken our economy. It's Pierre Poilievre. Pierre Poilievre just doesn't get it. He is the type of lifelong politician, and I've seen this type around the world, a lifelong politician who worships at the altar of the free market despite never having made a payroll himself.
Obviously, he's right. That's true. 1,000,000% true. But worshiping at the altar of the free market coming from a fucking central banker, like, come on.
And now, in the face of President Trump's threats, Pierre Poilievre still refuses to get his security clearance. At a time when our national security is under threat as it has never been before. At a time of immense economic insecurity, he would undermine the Bank of Canada. M. Poilievre veut fermer Radio-Canada et CBC. Ouais. À un moment où la désinformation et l'ingérence étrangère sont en plein essor. Il insulte nos maires et il ignore les Premières Nations quand il est temps de bâtir. La démocratie et les droits de la personne sont en péril à travers le monde. Et il laissera notre planète brûler. Pierre Poilievre would let our planet burn. This is not leadership, it's ideology. It's ideology that betrays what we as Canadians value, each other. It's an ideology that also represents a fundamental misunderstanding of how the economy works. Now, unlike Pierre Poilievre, I've actually worked in the private sector. I know.
But I thought you just made fun of him for worshiping at the altar of the free market. And now you're bragging about working in the private sector. And I'll say this, I think accusing the opposition of ignoring climate change is very fair. But his own approach, Carney's own approach, is completely contradictory if they also plan to remove carbon taxes and continue supporting conventional energy investment in fossil fuels. Consistency in climate action is crucial. You should go beyond criticizing the opponent to proposing transformative policies like phasing out fossil fuel subsidy or investing heavily in renewable energy or implementing a just transition for fossil fuel dependent workers. Just platitudes, and we eat it up. And that's what we'll get, and it'll work.
I know how the world works, and I know how it can be made to work better for all of us. That knowledge is especially useful now in the service of Canadians when we must build a new economy and create new trading relationships. Let me tell you something else that we know that Pierre Poilievre doesn't. We know that markets don't have values, people do. And we know as Liberals that it's our job to make markets, to make the economy work for all Canadians. These are the most powerful tool we've ever invented. They can find solutions to our greatest problems. And when the private sector, when the markets are governed well, they deliver great jobs and stronger growth faster than anything. But markets are also indifferent to human suffering, and they are blind to our greatest needs. So when they're not governed well, or not at all, they will deliver enormous wealth for the lucky few and hard times for the rest. And
see, like, it's just capitalism was okay as long as the right people are in control. That's literally what he just said.
In this crisis, we must help those who are hit hardest by the American tariff. We build our strength here at home. That's the right thing to do. That's the fair thing to do. That is the Canadian thing to do. That is what makes us strong. So Donald Trump...
There's a lot of preaching towards unity, but nothing that's like explicitly addressing any type of socioeconomic disparity in any type of material way. A truly unified society would address things like child poverty, systemic racism, underfunding of social services, underfunding of schools, underfunding of education, things that the federal government might not have a direct hand on, but can still platform on and still address in like a political way, because strength is measured by how the most vulnerable are treated. And so having outright and clear policy details on things like a guaranteed federal housing policy or implementing some type of a universal basic income that would consolidate things like disability and things like that. All of that would bolster a call to this. That's what makes us strong. Instead, again, just platitudes, right? That's what it is over and over again, just platitudes.
Thinks he can weaken us with his plan to divide and conquer. Pierre Poilievre's plan will leave us divided and ready to be conquered. Because a person who worships at the altar of Donald Trump will kneel before him, not stand up to him. Pierre Poilievre's slogans are not solutions. His anger is in action. His division is in strength. Division won't win a trade war. Division won't pay the rent or the mortgage. Division won't bring down the price of groceries.
When he's looking among the room saying won't pay the rent or the mortgage, he's talking about he's looking at the landlords in the room, to our MPs.
Canada strong. Voilà où mène la politique négative de la division et de la colère. La moitié des États-Unis craint l'autre et s'en méfie. Nous ne pouvons pas laisser une telle situation se produire au Canada. Les Américains deviennent de plus en plus divisés, ce qui va les affaiblir. Et nous gagnerons cette bataille si nous sommes unis et forts. Ouais. On peut se disputer au sujet de la politique. On peut se disputer à propos de hockey. On peut même être une fan des Oilers à Ottawa. C'est un pays libre. Mais quand il s'agit du Canada, nous sommes forts. Canada fort. Now, I've learned a few things from long experience in crises. And the first is that plan beats no plan. And you need to distinguish what you can change from what you can't. We can't change Donald Trump. Can't change him. Nous devons comprendre ce que nous pouvons et devons changer. Nous sommes maîtres chez nous. We can, and because we're masters in our own home, we can control our economic destiny with a plan that puts more money in your pockets. A plan that will ensure your government spends less so Canada can invest more. A plan that builds millions of homes, that makes us an energy superpower in both clean and conventional energy. A plan that creates new trade corridors with reliable partners. A plan that creates one Canadian economy, not 13. Because in Canada, we are stronger when we're united. We can give ourselves far more than Donald Trump can ever take away. But it will take extraordinary efforts. It won't be business as usual. We will have to do things we haven't imagined before at speeds we didn't think possible. We will do it. We will do it for the common good so that everyone benefits. I do care about the economy. But it's not because I'm an economist. It's because I care about people. That's why I'm a Liberal. That's why we are Liberals.
I know he just vaguely glanced at it, but like caring about people requires robust policy and robust action on inequality, like raising the minimum wage, having a federal minimum wage, expanding union rights federally, ensuring fair working conditions. While his speech very much mentions helping workers, there is no outline for any type of systemic measure like a wealth tax, stronger labor legislation. People on the left would view those things as essential for truly empowering ordinary Canadians rather than corporate interests. But that's, again, it's platitudes. That's what it is.
We need a strong economy, but when we're fighting for a strong economy, we're fighting for good Canadian health care for everyone. We are fighting for strong support for our seniors who built this country. We are fighting for child care for young families that they put in place. We are fighting for dental care and pharmacare for everyone who needs it. We are fighting for rights. We are fighting for a strong economy so we can create a more sustainable world for our children and grandchildren, and we will deliver. I know that these are dark days brought on by a country we can no longer trust.
To be completely fair, like this is a framing that primarily looks at these challenges that Canada is facing as external, but Canada was facing these problems long before Trump was in power. You should also be addressing a focus on actual domestic factors that don't have to do with tariffs and are the power of big corporations, weak labor protections, insufficient regulation of markets. Merely shifting the blame to Trump and to the U.S. diverts attention from Canada's eternal responsibilities, such as addressing corporate influence or implementing strong social policies. And that's something that you need to absolutely look out for throughout this campaign, is them trying to frame all of the problems as to be blamed on the U.S. and Trump, when that's not how it works. These problems were being like Canada was facing problems like this for years before Trump was in power. Yeah.
Are getting over the shock, but let us never forget the lessons. We have to look after ourselves, and we have to look out for each other. We need to pull together in the tough days ahead. And so, to those families watching this evening in Fort Smith, in Edmonton, and across every community in Canada, I promise you this: together we can and we will get through this crisis. We can and we will come out stronger than ever, and we will because Canada is built on the strength of its people.
Canada is built on the strength of all of its stolen land and the resources that it's extracted from the Indigenous peoples who were here long before Canada ever existed.
From our mines to our ports, from our logging roads to our city streets, we're strongest when we're united, when we're one economy, not team, when we can cheer for different teams and still be on one team when it counts. When we come together, we build things that last because we are Canada strong. Vive la Canada! Merci tout le monde.
Ending with this like unifying call, again, tons of lacking of concrete commitment on issues like affordable housing, pharmacare, dental care, and climate justice. While the rhetoric is surely uplifting, especially from someone who isn't Trudeau. I argue that the conclusion remains general and it does not sufficiently address the deeper structural changes needed for a truly equitable and sustainable future for Canada or the Liberals going forward. And I think like the speech really expresses ultimately unity, growth, compassion for everyone, for all Canadians. But my critique of it, it really sees it as like a lack of any detailed policy. Like the only detailed policy that he said was a outright criticism and pledge to eliminate the carbon tax. Right? No details, complete insufficient details on any type of robust environmental reform. And like inefficient social justice commitments, no mention of any type of wealth tax or strong union protection. The word union wasn't used once. Fully funded public housing, comprehensive Indigenous reconciliation in any way, selective use of values like rhetoric of Canadian values, tolerance, humility. It really rings hollow without any type of concrete steps to address marginalized communities and systemic inequalities. And then just purely limited structural change, like this emphasis on economic growth and competitiveness without recognizing the inherent inequalities in the market system that he both criticized, but then said that, oh, as long as the right people in charge, the free market is the greatest thing that can solve all our problems. Like he literally said that. It's a major oversight. So his speech touches on a lot of the broad liberal themes, but like all liberals' ideology, it lacks the bolder systemic solution that a principled left would advocate for, especially on economic justice, climate action, and any type of meaningful social support that goes beyond just new liberalism. But yeah, that's my critique.